Hello and welcome to Business Talk, brought to you by the Sharonville Chamber of Commerce. I'm Britt Scarce with Emory Federal Credit Union. I'm your host. And today here in studio, we have Pandy Pridemore from The Human Resource USA here to talk about the coming ban on asking questions about salary history. Pandy?
Did you ever think that was going to happen?
I didn't. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is just a really good example. This topic is just a really good example of where employment and labor law is going across this country right now.
Yeah.
Just to tell you how odd some of this stuff is, we've got 3 states right now in the country that are prohibiting employers from preventing employment based on hair color and hairstyle.
Really?
So
wow.
When something becomes the rage and somebody gets all excited about it, you have to really hone in, if you're somebody like me, to see how much enthusiasm and what of a trend it's going to become. And we're seeing a huge trend in the ban on conversation around salary and salary history.
So let's kind of talk about why that's a problem. So I'm an employer, and you're coming in and you're interviewing for a position, and I ask you, hey, so what kind of salary have you made in the past? So that I can kind of get a gauge. Even though I might actually, pay $70,000 for this particular role, if you're only used to making 40, I offer you 45, you're happy, right?
Oh, yeah, hold that thought. It was interesting with the Me Too movement, women became very conscious that they now had a voice. Mm-hmm. And that they had this huge audience of individuals who were concerned about how they were being treated and all the things that we could do to help them out. And in all of the conversation of harassment, all of a sudden it became, oh my gosh, we've also been holding these women back because they traditionally make less than men. Why is that, and what can we do about it? Mm-hmm. And that's, in my opinion, that's really where all this started, getting momentum. We have, 22 states and 11 municipalities across the country who have voiced their opinions to date to say, can't happen in this territory, cannot happen in this area. So from here on out, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman, doesn't matter your ethnicity, you have the right to go into any conversation about employment within those territories and areas and have a clean slate.
That's fantastic.
But and when you think about the employees that have been with an employer for 10, 15 years, you know that salaries don't grow at a real fast pace. The employers got you. If they want to do a performance evaluation or a cost of living increase, they do great. But now with the shortage of workforce that we have, mm-hmm. How often do you talk to somebody and they say, oh, well, I just got a 10% increase by switching from this employer to that employer? How did they know it was a 10% increase? Because they were talking about what their salary was and where they were or where they wanted to be. Yeah. We're hoping as employers that this will compensate skills and competencies more accurately in relationship to what the business can afford, mm-hmm. and not, create this major monster that people want these outrageous amounts and start asking for things that are unreasonable.
Sure. Well, I think an employer, knows what it is they want to pay for a particular position, don't they?
They do and they don't. That's the sad part. A couple of shows ago, we talked that pay ranges had kind of gone away. Mm-hmm. Again, we're just looking for the warm body, so find out how much it's going to cost, what does the guy want, and we just throw it out there. Mm-hmm. But there's still a lot of bias out there that we expect certain people or certain backgrounds to not demand more. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of keep this open window, and that's not going to work any further. They have to. Employers are going to have to walk in and say, here's the minimum, here's the maximum, here's the midpoint. Mm-hmm. It's going to come back to the mentality. And can that be obviously based on experience level? Absolutely.
So they still have a range that they can, that they can pay someone, but they just can't say, hey, what did you make over at XYZ company doing this position? Exactly.
And they can't, the guidance and the language also prevents employers from retaliating from an individual who doesn't want to tell. Mm-hmm. If they know they're protected by this ordinance, then they can completely pull back from that question.
Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
Can we go back to talking about what's expected on this position?
Yeah.
Can we go back to what my skill sets are in relationship to what your needs of the business are?
Right.
I mean, a savvy candidate's going to move that around. Now, the ordinance certainly doesn't prevent a candidate from volunteering it.
Right. And a lot of people might not know about this new rule, and they might say, hey, I was used to always making, and they don't realize how that really puts that's really shortchanging them, because that employer might have had a, $20,000 higher salary in mind, but saying, hey.
No, and that's why I thought it'd be good for the show to talk about this. Cincinnati just passed the ordinance here in March of 2019. Most people have no clue that it was even a discussion, since the state of Ohio has not put any formal language around it or put legislation. Although it doesn't go into effect till 2020, I think it's very important for employers to start changing the mindset.
You might as well start now.
Start now, and let's think about all the other implications. Their employment applications have to change.
Yeah.
That question has to come off.
Well, I was going to say,
job
wasn't that
applications.
on applications?
Oh, well, it's right up there with the Social Security number. If you haven't updated your employment application in the last 3 to 5 years. The question on felonies, we talked about that a couple shows ago.
Mm-hmm.
That has changed in the last few years. So absolutely, employment applications. And then what about the ones that are online? If you're using a third party as an applicant tracking system, you need to get to them and make sure that they've removed it, especially if an employer has multiple locations across the country and possibly has a location where they're recruiting individuals in one of those 22 states that have already passed the ordinance.
Yeah.
There are fines associated with violating this. And it's, we've said this before, plausible deniability does not work.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know about that.
Oh, shucks, was it still on there? And again, if somebody really wants the job, they're going to, do everything they can and kind of cross that line, and candidates shouldn't have to. You're right. If an employer really needs the skill set and they know that they've got, $50,000 to $70,000 to spend on it, they know they can get a return if it's the right individual with the right competencies, then don't worry about whether it's a male or a female, or whether it's somebody with 3 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
Some of these younger individuals coming out of the university, especially IT, oh my goodness, the skill sets are phenomenal, and they're actually sharing that and teaching some of our veterans that are in those fields now, just because they've been exposed to so much more. So why penalize them if they were just doing co-op jobs at $20 an hour,
Right.
when this new job may start at 50 grand?
Yeah.
But again, it puts a lot of responsibility on the employer. If they're not watching and holding that individual accountable as an employee and making sure that they are doing the quality of work that they're looking for, then shame on them. They are overpaying,
Yeah.
and they need to address that.
Yeah. But I think the bigger, you mentioned it earlier, that this seemed to hurt more women applicants
Oh, absolutely.
than it did men.
Absolutely.
Because, for, like you said, traditionally, for whatever reason, we can probably go into a lot of different, conversations about why that is, and discrimination is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
So if women were making less and then, they go to the next company, well, obviously she's looking for another position because she's looking to make more. So let's not hold her down at that salary.
Absolutely.
Especially if her skill
Absolutely.
set is there and commands more money.
And if the needs of the business can benefit from it,
Yeah.
again, they're paying for themselves. That's what I look at my clients and say, why are you so worried about paying this individual another $10,000 if they're going to generate the work
Yeah.
and you're going to get a return on it? They're paying for themselves.
Right.
Now, the day they don't,
Yeah.
then we'll address that.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that, again, companies need to start changing the mindset now. Another major recommendation I'd like to make is they need to worry, again, and we've talked about this in earlier shows, their interviewing process. They need to be very cognizant that they don't have every single person that's interviewing talking to this individual about salary, because I can tell you, if you got 3 or 4, somebody's going to slip out and say, well, what were you making? Or
Yeah.
were you making that much back then? It's just better to have 1 or 2 people with that control and that knowledge, and everybody else should stay technical. Everybody else should stay more towards the skill sets and the day-to-day necessities and needs of the position. Stay them interviewing there.
Right. So definitely employers need to be training their managers that do the interviewing properly.
Yeah.
Not just for this type of question, but the other bonehead questions they ask, like, do you plan on having kids, and all the other stuff that you just can't ask.
That's one of the oldest questions in the book, and I still get it. I still hear even business owners using that kind of language, and it's just not related to the needs of that position or why this individual's suitable or capable of doing the job.
Right.
No, stay away. Actually, I gave a presentation yesterday, and they said, well, then what do? We just ask them, what are you looking for? I said, no, the trick is you go in, and I would do this within the first 2 interviews. Do a small screening. If you really like the person, in the next interview, pull it out. Professional courtesy. If we extended an offer of employment today, what is the offer you would refuse? And here's the thought, Britt. Everyone has that line in the sand. Everybody knows how much money they need deposited in their account at payday. Mm-hmm. Benefits is aside, how much do they need to pay their electric bill, their groceries, gas, all that stuff. So if the candidate doesn't know what that number is, send them back. Say, let me know when you get that number, because I want to make sure we're still a good fit. Mm-hmm. But it's, what is the offer that you would refuse? If they say $45,000 and you have a pay range already established, 50 to 70, we're in good shape.
Yeah.
We're going to pay them the 50.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Because
hopefully they don't say
your,
46.
They could say 49 and 3. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But again, to be fair, and you want a candidate to start being happy.
Right.
You want that new employee to feel really good about themselves.
Yeah.
And remember, they can talk about compensation. We cannot stifle that. We cannot hide that. We cannot tell them it's confidential. They can talk about compensation in terms of employment openly and freely. So it's always good when everybody's morale is good.
Someone interviewing for a position, the potential employee can ask, does this pay this amount?
They can ask. Absolutely. They should. They should be interviewing.
I want to make sure I'm not interviewing for a $40,000 job when I need a 70.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I would scold them if they didn't. When I'm talking to candidates, so remember, you're interviewing us as we're interviewing you. So what questions do you have for us? Mm-hmm. And again, if that question hasn't come up in the first 2 interviews, then it needs to.
Mm-hmm. That's great information. Great information. Well, we've been talking with Pandy Pridemore from the Human Resource USA. New laws and new rules, being put into place every single day. So it's very important that we keep up with those. You've been watching Business Talk, brought to you by the Sharonville Chamber of Commerce. Until we see you next time.